Hello everybody, welcome to this video. It's a continuation in the series on the Tempest. We're up to Act 2, Scene 1. Everything I go through comes from Mr. Bruff's Guide to the Tempest. This is a revision guide that I co-wrote with Kerry Lewis. It contains the complete original text, line-by-line translation into modern English, and detailed analysis. So do pick up a copy if you are studying this text. So Act 2, Scene 1 develops the characters of the shipwrecked passengers, and it helps the audience to distinguish the good from the bad, extending the theme of challenging authority. I want to look first at King Alonzo. He is the highest ranking character, and he is depressed because he thinks his son Ferdinand is dead. At the beginning of the scene, Alonso hardly speaks, and when he does, he pleads, "Prithee peace" to Gonzalo, and later, "I prithee spare" to Antonio. So these short imperatives are softened by the polite use of prithee, which is, I pray that you. And it illustrates that he has not the heart to take control of the situation. The king at this moment is ineffective. It creates the opportunity for other characters, Antonio and Sebastian, to challenge his right to rule, as well as to try to comfort him, which Gonzalo does. Now, Shakespeare uses this scene to develop the court characters' contrasting attitudes towards Alonso in his moments of weakness. Gonzalo, Adrian, and Francisco attempt to comfort Alonso, and Gonzalo even says he should be feeling merry because they escaped with their lives. The adjective merry seems very inappropriate to use with a man grieving for the loss of his son, and this conveys Gonzalo's well-meaning but perhaps naive optimism and ineffectiveness, which we will discuss later in this video. Nevertheless, the audience is likely to feel sympathy for the king, seeing him as a father who has lost his son, and this contrasts greatly with Prospero's presentation of Alonso as the uncaring enemy in the previous scene. So by the end of this scene, the audience will feel even sorrier for Alonso because he's the victim of an attempted assassination, and this vulnerability makes it easier for the audience to accept his repentance at the end of the play. In contrast to the lords Adrian and Francisco and the wise counsellor Gonzalo, Sebastian demonstrates a complete lack of empathy towards his brother Alonso. He jokes, mocks, and bets in a deeply unpleasant double act with Antonio, and both, of course, are traitorous younger brothers. Their commentary on the courtiers' attempts to comfort the king reveals a cynical and dispassionate attitude, which is surprising, as we would expect at least Sebastian to feel sorrow for the loss of his nephew. This emotional detachment makes his attempted murder of the king later in the scene much more credible, much more believable. So throughout the scene, Sebastian's defiance escalates, and instead of comforting his grieving brother, he blames Alonso for being shipwrecked because they were sailing home from his daughter's wedding in Africa. "Sir, you may thank yourself for this great loss that would not bless our Europe with your daughter, but rather lose her to an African." In other words, if Alonso had married Claribel to a European instead of an African, they would have not been caught in the tempest, in the storm. So there are distinct racist undertones here, with the positive adjective bless in conjunction with Europe, in contrast to the negative verb lose referring to an African. Of course, Claribel has married a king, but Sebastian defines him by his race, and the audience is reminded that high-status women were regarded as possessions to be married off by their families for financial and political reasons. Claribel, according to her uncle, Sebastian, did not want to marry the King of Tunis, but did so out of duty to her father. True or not, high-status women had little control over their marriage prospects and their lives in general. Now, Alonso's response to Sebastian's accusations, another prithee peace, is weak and ineffective, prompting Sebastian's next unpleasant comment, "You've lost your son, I fear forever, and the fault's your own." He's deliberately trying to hurt the king's feelings. He's challenging him in front of the other courtiers, undermining Alonso's ability to make good decisions and to govern wisely. And this defiance foreshadows Sebastian's decision to attempt to kill the king later in the scene. The tale of the widow Dido is significant to the events of The Tempest in a number of different ways. By the way, do you like the picture? I had to do it. So this is how the story runs. Dido, the queen of Carthage, had an affair with Aeneas, a Trojan prince, and when he ended the relationship to pursue his destiny in Italy by founding the city of Rome, Dido committed suicide. Then the Dido story is significant in several ways to the Tempest. By linking Claribel's name to Dido's name, it's hinted that Claribel's relationship isn't going to be a happy one. It's also significant because Antonio challenges Gonzalo's description of Dido as a widow. They had not married, hence Antonio's surprised sneer, "Widow, a pox on that." Also, Adrian corrects Gonzalo, rightly stating that Dido was from Carthage, not Tunis. And a further significant feature is that Gonzalo's thoughts on the ideal society might have been interpreted as a threat to the status quo, because in his fantasy world there would be no aristocracy, no inherited wealth, everything would be shared, and nature would provide what people need. However, Shakespeare neatly avoids charges of sedition, which is where you incite people to rebel against the king, by implying that Gonzalo's speculations cannot be trusted because they are factually incorrect, and therefore his ideas about a utopian society or golden age are the dreams of a foolish but well-meaning old man. Gonzalo's Utopia speech uses ideas from Montaigne's essay on cannibals, in which Montaigne argued that savage societies were more sophisticated than European societies, and that their colonizers are the real barbarians. The essay, as we've already looked at in this video series, gave rise to the idea of the noble savage who lived in harmony and peace with nature and with others. Thinking about societies and how they should be run was a topical concern. As we know, there'd already been attempts on King James's life with Guy Fawkes's gunpowder plot, and as already mentioned, the division between the rich and the poor was growing wider, culminating later with the English Civil War. It's unlikely that Gonzalo's ideas of utopia would ever work, because human nature is greedier and more unpredictable than he thinks. Shakespeare demonstrates this greed and opportunism when Sebastian and Antonio plot to kill Alonso and seize his crown. However, while Gonzalo is optimistic and appears to be happy with life, he might be more complex than he seems. Although he is loyal to Alonso, the fact that he has considered at length how an ideal society should be run implies that he has some concerns about the king's rule. So the setting of the island develops the theme of magic and illusion, heightening the difference between the characters through pathetic fallacy. Gonzalo sees only the good when he says how lush and lusty the grass looks, how green. His exclamations and use of alliteration with lush and lusty emphasize this enthusiasm. Adrian also sees the positive aspects of the island, using personification when he states, "The air breathes upon us here most sweetly," as if the island is a benevolent being. But Sebastian responds that the air is like rotten lungs, while Antonio adds that it smells like a fen, in other words, a swamp. And both characters associate the island with unwholesomeness. So the setting, therefore, reveals the personalities of the characters because they each see the island in different ways. The magical theme is developed in this scene when Gonzalo notes that their clothes are as fresh as when we first put them on, despite the fact that they were immersed in seawater. Perhaps the fresh clothes with their positive connotations foreshadow that Prospero will show mercy to the characters, hinting at the themes of renewal, forgiveness, and reconciliation. So now that the audience members have had the opportunity to evaluate Sebastian and Antonio, it is more likely they will see as credible their attempt to kill the king towards the end of the scene. We see the theme of the challenge to power and authority when Antonio flatters Sebastian, who is initially reluctant but quick to be persuaded, and tempts him to overthrow his brother. Antonio uses a range of rhetorical techniques, the kind of which you might use in your English language exam. He uses some flattery when he says worthy. He's got the rhetorical question, which is unfinished, to attract attention and make himself sound hesitant. There's the imperative, no more, to make himself sound, impressive. What thou shouldest be is this friendly, chatty tone. The word thou was informal and is used to flatter. The full stop, the caesura, emphasizes the next part. And on it goes. Like a devil whispering in Sebastian's ear, Antonio employs a variety of strategies to convince Sebastian to kill Alonso. The first is a fact: Ferdinand is drowned, followed by details of Claribel living too far away from Italy to rule it. And again, we see all of these rhetorical devices. You can look at them on the screen in your own time. Now, the revision guide has a further 5 paragraphs or so of analysis of this scene. Do pick up a copy, and I hope you enjoyed the video.